Moving to Kenya can feel overwhelming. I mean, where do you even start? From getting a visa to finding a place where you want to live and setting up your life. I'm here to guide you through every single step of the process because I went through it myself. Stay tuned until the end of the video to really get the most out of it for your own move to Kenya. I moved 2 years ago at 23 from Germany to Nairobi in Kenya. This is why I'm making this video for you because I know it can be very challenging and tough. Then let's start with step number 1. This is research and planning. So the first question you should ask yourself is, what is your reason to move? Like, what is your plan? What do you want to do? Personally, for me, it was just setting up my business here in Kenya, living life here in Kenya, and building something meaningful here in Kenya. So my main purpose was building a business and experiencing life in a different continent, and also be a bit close to my African roots here. But for you, it can be very, very different. So it might be that the job wants to move you over to Kenya, or it might be to only exploring your roots. You may be also wanting to start a business. I think it's very important to identify the reason you want to move for first off, before you even make any steps. Because it helped me at least to be dedicated to this goal and to be dedicated enough to push through all the challenges because I knew what I was coming for. And based off that, I think you can make your decision in which city you want to live. Let's say if you just want to retire and want to enjoy life, you can also move to one of the coast cities like Diani, Watamu, Malindi, or go to Mombasa. So it depends if you want to relax and want to live a life on the beach and you don't have any need to be in Nairobi, for instance, to do any kind of certain business activities or to meet people all the time. You can also go to one of the coast cities. But on the other hand, if you're coming here for the purpose of doing business, or maybe there's an employer that wants to send you over here to Kenya, most of the time the place you might be sent to, or it might make more sense to move to, is Nairobi, because most of the business, most of the companies, most of the NGOs, basically everything is set up here in Nairobi. If you're coming for just living your life and enjoying the lifestyle you can have here in Kenya, you can also look out for different cities. Like Nairobi is the biggest city. You have then Mombasa, what's the second biggest city, but you can also go to cities like Nakuru. That's the third biggest city here in Kenya, I think, with around 500,000 people. And there you also have beautiful nature, landscapes, you have lakes, you have seas, you just are in the middle of the nature. So it really depends on what your purpose is of moving to Kenya. And from there on, you can make different kinds of decisions. Let's say for me, it was necessary to be in Nairobi because I wanted to set up my business here. I wanted to explore life here, build life here, build my network here. So I had to be in Nairobi. Otherwise, I had to go all the time to Nairobi to meet the people I wanted to meet and make my research and just go through the process of building my business here in Kenya, basically. And I think the next thing you should keep in mind as well is let's say in my case, I came alone. So I had to just take care of myself. I had to just figure out my insurance for myself, my permit for myself. Basically I had to do everything just for myself. But if you're coming with a family, you also have to make sure that you find a proper school for the kids. You have to make sure that you also are stable enough to support your family, even if you're moving here to Kenya. So all these different circumstances will determine what is better and what kind of location you will pick in the end of the day. And to get some insights for this one, because the city I spent the most time in is mainly in Nairobi, but I also went to Mombasa, Kilifi, Watamu, Lamu, so different kinds of cities, even within the country, not just on the coast. So I saw things in this instance more as a holiday location, so I cannot really judge by it. There are a lot of expat or immigrant forums. Once on Facebook, you can find a lot of groups where also all the people that moved here from different countries are just gathering, and you can ask your questions there. They can give you the insight of living in Nakuru, they can give you the insight of living in Mombasa. So different kinds of cities to get an image of how it actually is for someone who is in a similar situation than you. And even maybe message a couple of people that made the same steps, or maybe message a couple of locals that are living here, doing business here, just spending their time here. This will give you already a proper insight of what life here could be like and where you would like to settle, depending on the purpose you have with moving to Kenya. This brings me to the next step, and this is visas and legal requirements. So it really depends on the purpose you have. If you come here to build a business, if you're coming here with an employer, if you're coming here to retire, if you come with an NGO, things are always different. So for all these different things, you have also a specific type of visa. For me, I had to pick the business visa because I was planning to do business here in Kenya, and therefore I needed to have the business permit to actually be active on the ground and do activities legally here in Kenya. For you, it might be different because when you come with an employer, with a company that wants to host you here in Kenya, the requirements are different again. So I think it's a good starting point, if you understand the purpose you have, if you really are ready to make a move like this, and like you feel like it's something you really want to do, it might make sense to check out in the next step what kind of visa category you would fit in. Because for instance, you can come in first off as a tourist just to see if you even like Kenya, like if it's a place you want to live in before you plan like the final step and like just get everything ready beforehand. So you can come in for 90 days and even extend the visa for another 90 days to really get an image of the country, of how life is like here. And then again, depending if you come in here for business, to like get the infos you need, even for retirement or for whatever you're coming for, you can really soak in the spirit of the country first or before you are finally getting ready to make a move like this. And if you still have the same feeling that you really want to live here, from there on you can just take the next step and like see what kind of visa you need to stay long term here in Kenya. Because they also, even like for some of you guys would be interesting, Kenya just launched a digital nomad visa as well. And I can just put in the visas you can get into the description so that you can see what kind of category you're fitting in that will help you the most to get like a long-term visa here. And I think even after 7 years of staying here in Kenya on a residency, you can also get the permanent residency in the end of the day. So it's also quite interesting. And then depending on the visa you want to get, there's also different fee structures, different kinds of documents you need. But I cannot go into all of them because for all different types of visas, it's very, very different. And if you're really curious and need some more support, I can also make videos for each category if this is something you're interested in. I will also put down below in the description what kind of requirements you need for the certain kinds of visas. So if you figured out which visa would suit you, or like you have different kind of options that would fit you, you see the different kinds of requirements you need to have to actually obtain the visa. And here's just one little tip for this one. Start the visa process quite early if you're very sure that you want to move, because it can take quite a while. If you're doing it for the first time, for me it also took almost a year. I think it took 11 months for myself to get my visa. And I thought I could do everything from abroad. I did most things abroad, but in the end I had to come here for 3 months as well to finally push through the visa and like get it officially done. So it would take longer than you think, so it's better to start earlier instead of waiting too long and getting stressed about the process. And this leads me to the next step. Even if you come in here for the first 3 to 6 months as a tourist, or like even less, or if you finally made the step to move here, you need to find housing. And the way I took personally to find housing properly here is I went into an Airbnb, I think for the first 10 days of my stay here when I was ready to finally move over here. Within these 10 days, I was just searching a lot for different kinds of apartments. I went to different locations, different apartments every single day to figure out where I want to stay long term, because in the end of the day, if you get an Airbnb or getting like a short-term rental, it will be definitely more expensive than if you get just something for a longer term. And the offer is huge on Airbnb, or like you can also start Googling or like check in as well the same Facebook groups I recommended in the beginning. You can just put in your needs into this group and people will just send you via DM like different kinds of apartments, different kinds of locations you should stay in, where to go to, and this will help you. Also, I just took 10 days because I knew this was my first priority to save money in terms of housing before I get everything else ready, because I was anyways waiting for my visa to be finalized. That's why I decided just to stay 10 days or 9 days or something like this in an Airbnb, and I moved right away after these 10 days. But for you, if you want to take a bit more time and like you don't have this much time because you might also have to work in the meantime or whatever you need to do, you can also stay for a month, but I wouldn't recommend to stay longer than a month in an Airbnb or short-term rental. You can always get a cheaper price. If you just look at like deducting the Airbnb commission from the rental price, you would already save money if you just get into contact with the person who's renting out the apartment basically. So here are some things to consider while looking for an apartment. So if you come in from a foreign country, for me it was first of a decision of a safe and pretty central location. I was thinking of either Levington, Kilimani, Kileleshwa or Westlands in the beginning, and that's where I also moved in. I moved into Levington, and I paid for my first serviced apartment. For the first, I think it was the first 5 months, I paid around $700 and it was furnished already, so it took a bit of my headache, but it was still quite expensive compared to what I have today. But just that you get the understanding of the areas, yeah? Let's say Levington, Kilimani, Kileleshwa and Westlands are the areas I would consider to move to if you would like to have a central location, what is still a bit like the upper middle class area. So they are definitely a bit more expensive, but if you look into Kileleshwa and Kilimani, they might be slightly cheaper than Westlands and Levington as well. If it's not necessary for you to be in the city and to be in a central location, you want it a bit more quiet and peaceful, you can also look out in areas like Karen or Gigiri. And I stay personally in Spring Valley. It's also like right behind Westlands, so right behind the very central location. It's still very quiet and peaceful, but these areas are also a bit more costly in terms of what you will pay in rent. But in the end of the day, you have a bit more peace of mind. This also depends on the needs you have and what you want. For instance, when you live somewhere in Gigiri, let's say in Runda, it's an area that's a bit further away from the actual city. You are not that close to many amenities, so you don't have many grocery stores there. You have them, but you always need to take a car. You always need to drive there, and if you don't have a car, it can be costly if you have to take an Uber all the time. But let's say if you live in Westlands or something, you can still take Ubers or Bodas, and they are cheaper because the distances are much shorter. But in the end of the day, it's also the question of if you're getting a car or not. But like in the end of the day, it's a good starting point for you to be somewhere central to figure out all the locations actually. And even if you just stay in an apartment for the first 3 months or something like this, you will already have a good understanding of how the city is built, where you can live in, what area you prefer, what is like nicer for you and like fits your lifestyle better. So it might make sense to go in the first couple of months, or like the first couple of months to stay in one area, and from there on you can experience everything until you make the final decision where you want to stay. So and this brings me to the next step, that is setting up your utilities. So here, for instance, in Kenya, you can pay your utilities all over the phone. I'm, for instance, paying water with my landlord, what is quite cheap. And we are like 4 of us in the house now. And we pay approximately like 2,500 shillings, what is around like $15 to $20. And let's say electricity is a bit more expensive, but it also rose a lot in price. So like a couple of months back, I was paying maybe 50% of it. But we also all working from home, and like we use a lot of electricity because we're all here. We pay approximately $50 a month for electricity. Sometimes it goes up, sometimes it goes down, but it's still fair priced. And in the end of the day, you don't have to worry about setting this up because most of the times the landlord already has to set up. So you just need to pay online to a certain number they will give you, or they will just introduce you to the process of how it's been done. So this is quite easy. No, don't worry about this too much. The only thing you need to do yourself, at least what I needed to do myself when I moved into my first unfurnished apartment, was just getting the internet connection ready. And for this one, for instance, you can go to Safaricom or Zuku. These are the two biggest ones, but I'm personally at Safaricom. And you can just go ahead in one of the branches and tell them what you need. And then they will just tell you what kind of options you have, pick from the different offers, and then they will just come to your place, install it, and then it should work like after a couple of days. Just to give you an example, I'm paying now 4,300 shillings every month, and this gives me unlimited data, and this also gives me a speed of around like 40 Mbps, what we need because we all the time have meetings, we all the time need to work, upload and download stuff. I would consider this a quite fair price, but if you don't need it that much, you can also go with the lower packages. If you also need more, there are also bigger packages. And in the end of the day, if you really don't want to depend on the local providers, there's also the option for you to connect with Starlink, because they're also set up here in Kenya already, so you can also use their packages. I think you just have a higher first time purchase cost because you need to get the router, what was free here for me. But in the end, I think the monthly fee for faster internet and unlimited data as well is also a little bit cheaper, so it could also make sense for you if you really need a reliable and strong connection all the time. So now you know your purpose, now you know how to get the visa and which one to get, you know where to find your housing, and you know how to set up your utilities. And the next thing I want to mention here is just how to get around, because there are different kinds of transport opportunities here for you. And I would say the most used one here in Kenya, the local one, is the matatu, what is basically just the minibus you see as like public transportation in Germany or like in other countries in the world. This one is quite cheap because I think, if I remember correctly, the last time I drove I paid 70 shillings, what is approximately like 50 cents, just to get to pretty far destination. And I think you pay it per ride. Every single time you change the matatu, it's 70 shillings for you, but therefore it will also take longer because like a public transport, and they will stop at every location where they're going to, and it's quite hard to understand if you're here for the first time how to use it. And especially if you don't know how to use it and like where to go to, you don't know the areas very well, and you don't know how to behave in these matatus, it can also be a bit tricky, and like some people told me it can be also quite dangerous. But I drove myself a couple of times. I never had any issues. I was just using Bolt and Uber my first year here because it's still fairly cheap, because you can go, let's say, for a drive of 10 to 15 minutes, or let's say 15 minutes, you maybe pay like $1.50 for it, or like maybe starting from $1. And then depending where you go to, it can be sometimes a drive of up to an hour, 45 minutes, 30 minutes, what you pay even less than $10 for. So it's still quite cheap, I would say. And in the end of the day, in the first couple of months I was here and was just taking the Uber, I approximately spent $150 a month, but I was really driving every day, everywhere, just to get around the city and get to know everything, was meeting different people everywhere. So I would say it's for me it was much cheaper than having my own car in Germany. So this is why I was pretty happy with the outcome. But also you have two options there. You can either take the cars, but you can also take the Boda Bodas. And the Boda Bodas are for me the better option in case of like the rush hour times, if you have a lot of traffic. And they're also a bit cheaper than the cars. You need to see what you feel more comfortable with, what is more convenient for you, and then you can make your own decision depending on the time of the traffic or whatever you feel the best with. A year ago we bought our own car here. In the beginning it's a bit hectic to drive here. It's a bit, let's say, more costly, at least what I'm used to in Germany, because also a lot of cars, they are quite cheap and they're still in very good quality. And here it's just a bit more expensive because all of the cars are imported here. And I remember Kenya had like one brand that was produced locally, but I think they shut down also their production because of some difficulties within the business. But just to get back to the point, I think cars here are a bit more expensive because they're heavily taxed as well. So you need to see if it's worth it for you to invest in a car, especially if you know you want to stay long term here. It might make sense for you to buy a car. Otherwise, if you don't want to stay long term here, it also is completely fine to just use Uber and Bolt. But then let's say if you want to take road trips or go anywhere further, it might be a bit challenging because then you need to use the public transportation, the bus, and you don't have the flexibility you have when you would have a car, let's say. At the end of the day, it's more than enough to have, for the first couple of months, just to use like Uber or Bolt, let's say. So now that we know how to get around, the next step is how to build a community. Because if you're coming alone here, you're not coming with the family, or even if you come with the family, you are still quite alone here. You want to make some connections, you want to meet some people, you want to make some friends. And then the question is, how do you do this the best way? So when I came here first, I just went to a bunch of networking events. I went to a lot of events where people invited me. I was just talking to a lot of people. And I think it's a quite good approach because, for instance, it's a very big city, so you have all different kinds of people. You have many foreigners here, you have many very nice locals and very nice people here in the city. So you can build out the proper network and the proper support system for you. And the way you can do it, for instance, if you want to start making the first few connections or meet the first like-minded people like you, there are different kinds of clubs here. You could go to a book club if you're interested in reading. You can go to runners clubs if you're interested in running. And you can do all these different kinds of things. Like there are many art workshops, there are many art classes. So there are many different events and courses and classes that bring the people together that care about the same thing. And I think it's a quite good starting point, because if you meet the first couple of people, then from there you will just flow, because they will bring you into their circle. You will meet more people and they invite you to different things. I think just the first couple of steps are a bit difficult, especially if you're not that outgoing as a person. But even then I was also similar like this when I came here first, but like I opened up more and more and more, that I was just open enough to meet a bunch of people here. And even you also can go to the different kinds of Facebook groups and like see what kind of people you find there, because you also have, if you feel more comfortable with like the first couple of days, to spend some time with like some other people that moved here from different countries. Might make sense to just get a feel from their perspective, but also it's beautiful to connect with the locals, to get their perspective of life here in Kenya and to see what they see. And because there are also many genuine ones, they are ready to help you as well with your journey, with your move, with like the things you need and the questions you have and stuff like this. They can also help you to navigate things more like a local than maybe the people that moved here from different countries. But just one thing, just be a bit conscious about like the people you meet here, because I made the experience personally. I met a lot of beautiful people here, like very nice locals, amazing Kenyans I met here along the way that helped me a lot through my journey. But I also met a couple of people that and I met also a couple of people that wanted to take advantage of me just because I'm a foreigner and I was here to do business. At the end of the day, just be a bit conscious of your environment, of the people you spend your time with. But I think you can figure out who's actually genuine and who's not, and then I think you can make connections quite quickly here as well. And then to come to the next step, that's also very important, is basically just overcoming different challenges. So let's say if you move from a foreign country to Kenya, it will be different. So if you're from the States, if you're from the UK, if you're from Europe, any country in the world, whatever country you're from, things are just handled different here. And this starts from the culture, because let's say there's a specific Kenyan time people work on or live on here. So they might be a bit late every now and then, or like very heavily late. There might be a bit different in terms of the interactions you will have with them, in terms of the conversations you can have with them, in terms of the things they talk about. But there's also different things like bureaucracy is different, because let's say when we talked about the visa process step, I told you it took much longer than I expected in the beginning. And this is also something that works different here. So let's say everything is not as structured as I was used to it. So it took me a little bit of time to adjust to it, even if I'm very much open-minded and I can adjust very quickly to different things. It's still a thing of like you need to think about, especially if you are moving here to Kenya, just that you don't expect the things to be the same way as you're used to them in your own home country, depending where you're from. Why I think this is a very important step is just for you to be very open-minded, that you can actually tackle all of these steps beforehand, and like you can tackle all of the problems and challenges you will face over time that you will see that are different than back home. This one is mainly just for your awareness because it took me some time to understand the local customs, and the best way I went through them is just by experiencing as much as possible and going out as much as possible here to experience all of it and talk to the locals. Whenever I had questions, how do I handle this and this and this here? What is the actual price for this? Whatever it is, I was mainly talking to my local friends here and they helped me to go over it and like to go through all of these steps. Yeah, as you see, moving to Kenya is a big step and like involves a lot of things. But in the end of the day, I don't think it's too far away from moving to a different city in your home country. Even if it might be a bit different in culture, if it's in different things with like how to handle things every now and then, I think a move is a move, and even if it's a bit more challenging, it's also very rewarding. But with the right plan, you can make this move happen, you can make it possible, and you can be very comfortable living here if you just are aware of all these things. I think there are a bunch of more things, and this is why I would love to know what kind of other fears you have about moving to Kenya. Drop it please down below in the comments so I can answer these questions and maybe some other people with experience can answer these questions, that we can help each other out. And I thank you so much for watching and all the best for your journey moving to Kenya.